Bienvenido a un nuevo programa de Nos la Tomamos en Serio. Hoy estamos con Alison Barkoff desde Estados Unidos. Welcome to a new program of Nos la Tomamos en Serio. Today with Alison Barkoff. Alison, nice to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
You've been a leader of a disability civil rights movement. Can you tell us a little bit your role in that movement, how you got started?
Like so many people in the disability rights movement, for me, it's personal and it's the connection. My brother was born with an intellectual disability with Down syndrome in the late 1970s. And at that time in the United States and all across the world, people with disabilities were separated from society. They were put in big institutions, and families like mine were told there's no place for your son or daughter in the community and in your family. And my family was part of the first generation of people who fought for something different. They fought for civil rights laws to protect the equal rights of people with disabilities, and they fought for services to help support people with disabilities to be in their own homes and communities, and really moved away from institutions. And I've been lucky for more than 40 years to be part of a disability rights community, both in the United States and internationally, where so much has changed. And I am a civil rights lawyer by training, so I do both work to enforce civil rights laws like the Americans with Disabilities Act and other civil rights laws in court, but I also do advocacy with Congress and with state legislatures in the United States to help people with disabilities get what they need to be able to live and participate in the community.
Alison, your husband said that you are a technocrat who operates in a very political world. We may ask you about having principles in government and how to achieve goals without making personal compromise.
I think the principle that really my work is driven by is that people with disabilities should be given the same opportunities in life like people without disabilities. So when I look at something, the test is if it's separate and special, then it's probably not something that is the thing I'm fighting for. I'm fighting for people like my brother to have a job that looks like the kind of job anyone else would have. I'm fighting for opportunities for people like my brother to go to school and be in a classroom with people with and without disabilities. And I think that very basic principle of, in America, we say not separate is not equal, is really what drives the work, that people with and without disabilities want the same things in life. Sometimes you need supports for people with disabilities to get there, but that's really what our goal is. Different politicians approach it are different. We have conservative politicians who do not think we should have safety nets or government programs. And so when I go into those kinds of offices, I talk about, well, if we had these kinds of supports for people with disabilities, for example, they could work instead of being at home. They could become a taxpayer and they would use less services. That's really different than what I might say if I go into someone else's office that's very liberal and it's about civil rights, and I focus on the civil rights of people with disabilities. But at the end of the day, it gets you to the same place. So it's about finding the positive way to connect on all of these issues.
Can you tell us about a positive, touchy story around the civil rights movement that you've been working on?
It's hard to think of one positive story to share. I think for me, some of the most positive experiences that I've had as a lawyer is working on cases where some of our lawsuits are about states that have thousands of people with disabilities who have spent their lives separated from society, being in big institutions, never making choices for themselves. And as part of the resolution of these lawsuits, we put in place a way for people who want to leave to move to the community and have supports. And the stories as I follow people are so incredible. These are people who their whole lives were told, you can't do anything. You're not capable of anything. And the first maybe 6 months they're out, they're not even used to being able to make the most basic choices of what kind of food they like to eat or when they want to go to bed. And it's even something they have to learn how to make decisions for themselves. And I often keep up with people over a number of years, a number of decades, and to see how people's lives are literally transformed when they have the opportunity to do the basic things that we take for granted, getting to know your neighbor, being in touch with your family, making a decision about, I like this grocery store over that grocery store. I like to cook. I want to order food. And it's so amazing to see how people blossom. Sometimes people who were so shy and introverted and really didn't talk, becoming leaders in their own communities or their own state, or sometimes even nationally, talking about how important disability rights are and fighting on behalf of other people. And in my head, I can just shut my eyes and picture literally hundreds of people who I've personally seen go through that transformation. And it's really, at the end of the day, about people's lives and valuing people and making sure people are valued parts of our community, and seeing that play out in the real world is probably the most incredible part of my work.
Cheers, Alison.
Yeah. Cheers. It's time for our first toast.
I want to take the opportunity that you come from the US, you live in the US, you have experience in fighting in civil rights. And I always have this question, in a country with a level of development like the US, and with the wealth of the US and the interest that should have this society, why is so complex to reach a public health system or something more similar to that? What's so difficult to get to that agreement? What happened to get there?
I think looking at it glass half full, it's been a very, very hard time in this country over the last 4 years about healthcare. We've had a big political fight of one group of people trying to take away what we have with the Affordable Care Act, and another group of people fighting to, what we would say, save the Affordable Care Act. And I think the positive thing that has come from this is, for the first time, I would say the majority of Americans are starting to see healthcare as a human right. It always was seen as, because the way our private health insurance system is set up and it's really tied to your employer, people saw it as a benefit, the same way retirement is or other kinds of benefits. And it wasn't really thought of as a basic right that Americans should have. I feel really optimistic, actually, looking at the election, looking at Congress and the issues that are really resonating, that we have moved more to where most of the developed world is, which is saying, we need to make sure people can get quality, basic health care. The fact that we now have literally people dying because they have cancer, but they don't have insurance to get treatment. They have literally, $1 million in bills racking up is unacceptable. And I am hopeful that over the next several years, we will be moving somewhere much more similar to what we see across Europe and in many different countries. I think our values as a country have been changing.
Work with a famous Spanish-speaking justice member. How was that experience? And a little bit, what is this female leadership that we need as a more diverse society? Can you elaborate on that?
So I was so privileged to work for Justice Sotomayor early in my career. And what I will say about Justice Sotomayor is not only is she incredibly brilliant and hardworking, but the thing about her is she has so much empathy. She comes from a background of, it's not just that she's a woman on the US Supreme Court. We have had not enough. She's only the third Supreme Court justice who is a woman in our history. But I think what's more incredible about her is the diversity of her experience. That she is our first Latina is amazing. And I think that she comes from a background of not having privilege is the most important thing. Literally, kids across this country for the first time look at the Supreme Court, look at her story, and see in a real world way. When someone tells you you can be anything you want, it's very hard to believe that if you don't see anyone who looks like you, who has a story like you. And I think she has resonated so much for young people across this country because she embodies the fact that if you work hard and that if you are committed, that if you're driven by values, you can achieve things. It's not only wealthy white Americans who go to private boarding schools and the best universities, that being one of the most powerful people, not just women, but people in the entire country, and I would say really in the entire world, is something that is possible for anyone, has just created so much opportunity for young women, young people of color across this entire country. And she is, as if you've read about her, she is truly as kind and warm and considerate as she seems. She is truly, I feel fortunate to have her as a mentor, and we are very lucky to have her on the United States Supreme Court.
I mean, what is the ideal situation of an inclusive society? I mean, when does the work with disability people end?
In our movement, we say all means all. And so sometimes there are some people with some disabilities that are included in society, but still people with other types of disabilities or more significant disabilities who are still separated out, who are still told there's a separate place for you. And I think, it certainly varies across the world. It even varies in the United States, but we still have a long way to go. And what I would say, Eric, to your question is, when every single person with a disability is empowered and making choices about their own life, when they are able to be part of their school, part of their community, part of a workplace, a member of their church or synagogue, and in leadership roles in our community, that's what I would say. Yep, we are there yet, but I feel pretty confident that the fight for disability rights and disability justice, just like civil rights, is one that doesn't end.
Imagine that you will have the chance to travel in the, I don't know if you ever watch the movie Back to the Future.
Yeah.
And you will have a chance to use that car and just go to another time. That will be the option by using the car. Then my question would be, imagine that you will have the chance to tell to the car to which time can you go? Which will be that time can be any moment in the future or in the past, what would you like to do on that time and why?
Well, you know, I'll wear my disability advocate hat for this question. I have a lot of things I'd love to go to different times to experience different social movements or political pieces. But, you know, I think for me to rewind back and really look at the time in America when we started setting up disability systems. And in some ways, we have spent the last 40 years undoing what people did with very, very good intentions in, you know, the early 1930s and 1940s and 1950s, when, you know, people stopped having big communities of families living all together where people with disabilities were really taken care of by their families. And they created these separate places saying, oh, we'll be able to take such good care of your son or daughter and they'll be safe here. And what it turned into, which is what always happens when you take people away from society and there are no external eyes, is abuse and neglect. Go back in time and never create these huge separate places and help people, you know, in my car, bring the models that we have today and show them what people with disabilities are capable of. When you give them support and you give them a chance, then I think we would be so far ahead, because really so much of our energy is undoing things, that if we started the right way from scratch, start with a place of valuing people and creating normal lives with support, be kind of what I would do with my magic car if I could.
Thank you, Alison. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Gracias, Alison. Nos la tomamos en serio.